So I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all, but I am a trader. I came from the banking sector. I know trading. I see the way markets work, and when you see silver and gold prices fluctuate the way they did last Thursday, that was option expiry date. So obviously there must have been a lot of people on the wrong side of that trade who drove down the gold prices and the silver prices that day. I think gold had $100 trading range that day, and silver had a $2 trading range that day. That's not natural markets. Markets don't act like that unless there's someone involved in moving those prices. And unfortunately, as long as that is allowed to continue to happen, I've been voicing this concern for a number of years now. The regulators don't come to the and look at what's really going on in these paper markets, because unfortunately, as a mining sector, we have to rely on the paper market for pricing our commodity.
Right.
If somehow we can get away from the paper market and price our market based on actual supply and demand, where we can actually deal with the end user directly, whether it's a Sony or Panasonic or a Tesla or BMW, you name the consumer. I think that's where we need to go, and that's where we get proper pricing, and that's what I'm pushing.
And we have touched on this before, that there isn't enough physical silver to back up the paper silver out there, that the futures markets may distort things.
Yeah.
So how does that get fixed?
By the mining sector standing up and saying we've had enough. The silver market trades approximately 1 billion ounces a day in the paper market, and the miners produce 800 million ounces in a year. So the leverage is astronomical. So as long as the regulators stand by and do nothing about that, and I don't expect they ever will, because generally speaking, the banks are pretty powerful out there. Who's going to who's going to stand up to that? It's got to be the miners. The miners have to get together, like OPEC, like the diamond industry, like the uranium industry. Why does silver and gold have to be treated differently as other commodities?
So is that something you would potentially do? Lead some kind of silver consortium to fight against this?
I've been vocal about it a number of times, and I'm on record today on Kitco and in this interview today. So I challenge the mining sector to come to the table and let's create a new system.
Is that something that you would like to be at the forefront of?
Absolutely.
How realistic is it to get all the
First Majestic is small. Like, we produce 13 million ounces of silver a year. So we're big in the sector, but you've got a lot of the base metal manufacturers, the copper manufacturers, the zinc manufacturers who produce multiples of that. But the silver is a small component of their overall financial system or statements, because they're predominantly copper producers or whatever the case may be. So they actually really don't care too much about silver because it's just a small line item. That's a small part of their business.
But have you had these conversations with bigger players? You're at a conference like this, for example. Mm-hmm. First time in a long time that everybody's in person, but this has been a lingering issue. You're at a conference like this. There are a number of titans of industry in attendance. Is this a conversation you guys are having on the sidelines privately, that it's time to form some kind of consortium?
I try my best. I brought it up a number of times with players in the industry, and I think it's a lot of work to do, and it is a lot of work. When you and the mining sector is very comfortable. And it's we produce our metal. The banks consume it, and it goes into industry, and we get paid. It's very simple, and the mining industry, as I said, is just too comfortable. If the mining industry would actually stand up and break the system, yes, it's going to take a lot of work. And yes, there will be challenges to do it. But I think, for our shareholders and investors, I think it's our duty to create a new system of pricing.
Create a new system of pricing, something that you think is long overdue. In the meantime, though, given the dynamics are what they are, what is your price outlook for silver for 2022?
Well, quite honestly, you kind of touched on a little bit earlier, but, we're mining 7 to 1. So what I mean by that is for every 1 ounce of gold we mine worldwide, we mine 7 ounces of silver. So, but we're trading at something in the order of 75 to 1. So we traded at 7 to 1 today at approximately $2,000 gold. It's at, $150 silver approximately. That's where we should be today. So we're not, obviously, but, I'm not going to predict $150, today. I am a triple digit silver guy, but I've dealt with it'll happen in 2022. But hopefully it happens in my lifetime.
But do you have a number that you care to throw out there for 2022?
Let's call it $30.
$30 silver. Not quite triple digit, not even anywhere near triple digit,
No.
but your life is still long.
Yeah.
So still very likely in your lifetime, Keith.
Yeah.
Want to touch on First Majestic very quickly because your company's financials have shown that your top line revenue has grown quite dramatically. Q4 results aren't out yet, but Q3 2021 top line revenue was at 380 million. Overall, you've had significant top line growth, but that hasn't been reflected in the share price. Why not?
You know, I think there's just been so much money flowing into the major markets that the entire mining sector has been ignored. You know, it is a small market. You know, you compare the mining sector to, you know, the high technology sector, for example. I don't know how many First Majestics can fit inside Apple, but it would be a lot. You know, Apple.
But you need First Majestics to make the silver that goes into the Apple phones.
That is true, and that's why we get so, you know, ignored for whatever reason. And you know, I've said, you know, we've seen Elon Musk, you know, invest in nickel or you know, also lithium. I wouldn't be surprised to see the technology sector start buying up mines, because what, you know, why not own the entire supply chain? You know, if you are producing iPads, you're at the mercy of the miners, and you need the supply. But in a constrained environment where the metal's not there, you need to own a mine to close the supply chain.
That is a very interesting strategy play. Is that something that you're thinking is likely for smaller silver miners and other metals and commodities miners to be bought up by these giant tech companies?
You know, you've seen the movie iRobot.
I have not.
Oh, you have not? Okay. Or Terminator. You know, Terminator.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, you know, in these types of, you know, sci-fi movies, there's always one or two conglomerates that basically run the planet. And we're not that far away from that. You know, look at this. How many trillion-dollar companies do we have today? You know, 10 years ago we had 0. I think today we have about 5, at least last I looked. So, you know, these companies are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're wiping out the competition. And that trend is going to continue. So what does that mean, you know, 10, 20, 30 years from now? These big conglomerates are going to own more and more of the supply chain. So yeah, for them to move down and start buying up the miners, for me as the CEO of First Majestic, I want to own the entire supply chain. I want to own the refinery. I want to own the smelter. I want to own the mint, because that way my margins increase. So why wouldn't a high technology, an Apple of the world, want to, you know, not do the same thing?
Well, it makes sense. It's disconcerting because you don't want to have so much consolidated power
Right,
and
for sure.
control.
Yeah.
But it makes sense that you'd have these giant tech companies buy up the supply chain. Has that happened so far in the metals industry at all?
Well, we've seen with Tesla, they've invested in nickel and lithium so far. They're the only ones that have done it, as far as I know. But yes, I think it's the beginning for sure.
So that's the trend you're forecasting, big tech acquiring some of the, at first, smaller miners?
I don't necessarily know about smaller miners, but strategic metals. And I look at silver as a strategic metal. I'm not sure if a mining or a high-tech company like an Apple, for example, needs to own a gold mine because they use such a small amount of gold. But silver is a different thing. Copper, you know, nickel, you know, these are strategic metals that they need to invest or develop and expand their businesses. So yes, I could absolutely see it there.
Well, that has